Zambia, and welcome to the second quarterfinals of the Smart Voices Debate Season 2, sponsored by Zambia Revenue Authority. My name is Chanzi Sikaze, and I'll be your host for this season. Let's get right into it. The motion for this debate is, and I quote, "This House believes that the revenue collection should be decentralized to local councils." And I repeat, this House believes that revenue collection should be decentralized to local councils. Proposing to this motion is Mukamambo, the second secondary school, and opposing is Parkland Secondary School. I will now read the rules of this debate. No religious references, quotations, or concepts will be allowed. Physical evidence is allowed, which includes a demonstration of evidence and shall be handed over to the adjudicator. Handwritten, printed, or published materials. The following items are prohibited in the preparation room: mobile phones, particularly smartphones, cameras, tablets, PCs, MP3 players, and anything that can store data electronically and or connect to the internet. All phones must be on silent, and the sequence of the debate is as follows. The first speakers on each team present their arguments for 4 minutes, no interjections. The second and third speakers will speak for 3 minutes. Interjections will be allowed. The speaker summarizing will be allowed 4 minutes, no interjections. Interjections are allowed and shall be done as follows. Interjections will be allowed after the first 1 minute of a speaker taking the floor. Each interjection will be done within a minute. A speaker can only be interjected twice. The moderator will enforce the rules allowing or rejecting interjections or calls for support. The timekeeper will pause the speaker's time when there's an interjection. And lastly, a team can propose to support a speaker after an interjection. Let's begin this debate. I will now call upon the first speaker from the proposing side.
Let councils rise and wise transform the ties that bind the price, while local hands expand the lands and earn trust that never dies. Before I go any further, allow me to state that all protocol be highly and deeply observed. Bouncing back to the main motion, which states, as I quote, "This House believes that revenue collection should be decentralized to local councils." End of quotation. As the first speaker, or rather the icebreaker, it is my duty to define the following key terms. Revenue, a state's annual income received from taxes. Decentralization, transfer of authority from central to local government. Council, a group of people elected to manage a city, county, or a district. With reference from the Oxford English Dictionary, may the Good Samaritan please do as wise by passing on the evidence to the judges. Heading on to my staple analysis, which goes as follows. As the first speaker, I'll talk about greater accountability via local tax collection, improved service delivery through locally collected tax, and reducing central government overload. Then my second speaker will talk about better alignment with local economic realities, stimulates local economic development, and increased transparency and fiscal oversight. Then my third speaker will talk about strengthening democratic participation, better tax compliances and morale, and reduction of large-scale national-level corruption. Then my summarizer will summarize, analyze, otherwise you won't understand. Today, we stand for empowering local councils, making our governance accountable and communities stronger. And we say together,
my tax, your tax, our destiny.
This motto reminds us that when citizens contribute to their own local development, we all share in the growth, the services, and the prosperity of the nation. Which leads me to my first point, which is greater accountability via local tax collection. When local councils begin to collect their own revenue, it makes accountability and transparency very easy for the people to see as they see how the money is generated in and how it is used. With alignment to SDG number 16, which talks about peace, justice, and strong institutions, when we leave such tasks to be done by local councils, it gives them a chance to stand strong as an institution with central government standard of help. Going on to my second point, which is improved service delivery through locally collected revenue. If local governments raise their own revenue, they can directly fund and prioritize local infrastructure, markets, roads, water, clinics, according to local needs. In alignment with SDG number 9, which talks about industry, innovation, and infrastructure, and SDG number 11, which talks about sustainable cities and communities. Local councils are better placed compared to central government as they are placed in a manner that they know the lackings that the community needs and where the areas which crave development. Going on to my last point, which is reducing central government overload. Central government already has more tasks, so decentralization reduces their overload, thereby strengthening the performance of local councils. In alignment to SDG number 16, which still talks about strong institutions, and SDG number 17, which talks about partnership goals. To strengthen my point, may the evidence please be passed on to the judges. Decentralizing revenue to local councils strengthens accountability, improves services, and empowers communities. It makes local development real, bringing to life the vision behind ZRA's core.
Let's build a better Zambia.
With these rigid and factual points, to the judges I salute and I rest my case.
Thank you so much, Madam First Speaker, for not only breaking the ice, but shattering it. I will now call upon the first speaker from the opposing side.
A nation's wealth is not lost in a day. It disappears when we trust those who cannot protect it. And today, the proposition wants us to trust local councils with the country's greatest treasure, its revenue, despite years of mismanagement, wastage, and inefficiency. And today, our responsibility is simple: to say no to risking the nation's greatest treasure. Miss Moderator, ma'am, esteemed panel of adjudicators and distinguished audience, dignified etiquettes be highly observed. Today, I rise as the first speaker of the opposition delegation to strongly reject the motion which stipulates and I articulate. This House believes revenue collection should be decentralized to local councils. End of articulation. I will now make this motion plain and accessible by defining the key words. Revenue collection, the process of gathering taxes, licenses, levies, and fees. Decentralization, shifting authority and power from central government to local councils. Local councils, district or municipal bodies responsible for local administration. Ladies and gentlemen, it is also my duty to clearly set and state the boundaries of this debate. We as a delegation acknowledge that local councils participate in revenue collection, but our debate today is centered on whether they should take over or dominate the revenue collection system. And ladies and gentlemen, our position is firm. Local councils should not be given primary responsibility over revenue collection. Ladies and gentlemen, as the wise say, power without capacity is nothing but a shortcut to failure. In the same way, we cannot hand the nation's financial lifeline to councils that lack the strength to handle it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll now bring out my point which will reinforce my position. Local councils have proven financial weakness and the evidence speaks. The Auditor General's report 2020 to 2023 consistently reveals and accounted for funds in more than 60% of councils, missing receipts, poor record management, uncontrolled wastage, and failure to remit collected revenue. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not theory, it is evidence. May the Good Samaritan pass this on to the judges for further verification. Ladies and gentlemen, if councils cannot properly collect market levies and bus station fees, how can they manage millions in national revenue collection? Furthermore, rich councils like Lusaka, Ndola, and Kitwa will flourish, while poor councils like Nyimba, Kaputa, Chambishi, and Nalolo will collapse because they have very little revenue base. Ladies and gentlemen, a nation cannot grow when one side eats while the other starves. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll now provide a clear roadmap on how my fellow members will scrutinize the bond of contention. I, as first speaker, have opened this debate by laying the foundation for my fellow panelists. The second speaker will talk about how decentralization leads to double taxation. Our third speaker will talk about mismanagement of funds, lack of infrastructure, and corruption involved in local councils. And last but not least, our summarizer will wrap up this debate with precision, power, and clarity, reinforcing why our position stands firm. Ladies and gentlemen, decentralization sounds attractive, but let us keep in mind that not everything that glitters is gold. With these few but convincing words, I beg to submit.
Thank you so much, Madam First Speaker, for breaking down the motion for us. I will now call upon the second speaker from the proposing side.
When taxes flow and grow, communities can reap and show the lives they pave and save, the roads they live to know. But before I go any further, allow me to write on protocol set by my Prime Minister according to order of seniority. In short, I simply say, may all protocol be highly and deeply observed. Bouncing back to my main motion, which states as I quote, This House believes that revenue collection should be decentralized to local councils. End of quotation. I'll move on to my first point, which states better alignment with local economic realities. Local councils understand their economic base, especially when it comes to farming, mining, and trade, better than central authorities. When they control tax instruments, they can tailor tax rates and structures to fit the local economy, supporting growth rather than stifling it. Members of this House, Zambia is not the only country with goals. We have countries like Nigeria. Nigeria has had decentralization for over 2 years now, and it's positively benefiting from decentralization. If we look at Zambia, Zambia is having a goal and a vision, which is Vision 2030. If Zambia decides to take up decentralization, it's going to support its SDG, which is SDG number 8, which speaks of decent work and economic growth. It's going to positively move into that direction. To short term a debater who speaks from within and not from without, may the Good Samaritan please do as wise. Another example of Zambia itself, in Gwembe district, the local council has studied and implemented strategies for on-source revenue collection tailored its own economic structure. And another historical example is the Swahili city-state in East Africa, where local tax collection was based on trade goods such as gold, ivory, and spices, aligning taxes with economic reality. Moving on to my next point, which states local accountability and transparency. Local revenue collection allows citizens to monitor how funds are raised and spent, increasing accountability. With reference to SDG number 16, which talks of transparency, justice, and strong
Point of interjection.
Members of this House, here's a piece of evidence.
Allowed.
Ladies and gentlemen, the current speaker just stated that it increases accountability. But how would you increase accountability? If the local councils actually start collecting taxes, if we decentralize to them, they actually keep their actions hidden. They may collect tax in other agendas. They may increase the taxes without the people knowing. How it increase accountability? When ZRA collects tax, they actually remove a forum how they collected the tax. That increases accountability. That already shows that Zambia is already being accounted for.
Point of defense.
Point of defense allowed.
Affiliates of this session, what my speaker was talking about was transparency and accountability. Actually, the local councils can be accountable because we look at the morale that the local council is giving the people. Not only that, the ZRA removes the forum. The local councils can also do that, so please clarify your point.
Point of interjection.
Point of interjection allowed.
Bonafide affiliates of this debate session. Throughout the years, we have seen that local councils have mismanaged the taxpayers' funds. We have seen that they've been using money in the wrong places, in the wrong places. And also, in a case of last year, the government allocated about 5 million that went missing out of the ordinary. Where did the money go?
Point of rebuttal.
Point of rebuttal denied. May the current speaker continue speaking.
Allow me to continue as though I was never disturbed. With reference to SDG number 16, which talks of transparency, justice, and strong institutions, members of this House, Lusaka City Council shows gaps in transparency but reforms in Rwanda. OSR collections increased citizens' oversight. Members of this House, the government still speaks of Vision 2030. If they decide to decentralize their revenue collection, it's going to increase the amount of accountability and transparency because the citizens will be able to see what's going on amongst the local council. May the Good Samaritan please pass on this piece of evidence to the judges for further verification. Allow me to move on to my next point, which states innovation and efficiency through district tools. Councils can adopt ICT for efficient tax assessment and collection. Members of this House, Zambia itself in Chalanga district, councils adopted ICT in revenue collection, improving record keeping and accountability. Members of this House, it would be better to 30 seconds to sum up.
30 seconds allowed.
Here with me is a piece of historical example which says the Ashanti Kingdom in West Africa, where a local system of tribute and taxation supported markets, artisans, and agriculture production at the community level. Moving on to my last and final point, which states accountability through digital and participatory means. Digitization plus participatory governance ensures transparency and reduces mismanagement. Members of this House, may the Good Samaritan please pass on this evidence to the judges to strengthen my point. With these few but convincing points, I simply raise my case.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. I will now call upon the second speaker from the opposing side.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator, ma'am, for your humble call. Zambia has invested heavily in centralized digital systems that actually support revenue collection. Their digital systems are coordinated, transparent, and accounted for. To dismantle them in favor of councils that actually use outdated methods like the manual receipt books would be to move backwards. Efficiency requires one strong system, not many weak ones. But before I go any further, I would like to recognize the VIPs who made this debate session a success. To the Honorable Chairperson, I salute. And through Ms. Moderator, ma'am, may all diplomatic etiquettes be highly observed. But as I'm writing on the protocols that was stated by my opposition leader, I'll dive into my first point. Most local councils in Zambia simply don't have the capacity and technological expertise to handle large revenue collection. If we go to many councils in Zambia, you find that the methods that they used way back in our forefathers' times are still the same methods that they're using today. Then how can you trust them with the country's greatest treasure, our tax? And furthermore, local councils lack trained auditors, they lack trained accountants, and they lack digital systems that actually makes them a very bad way of getting revenue. In rural councils, can you believe that in rural councils they're still using the only one method, the manual receipt books? This method can easily be altered and manipulated. This leaves rooms for leakages, errors, and mismanagement of funds. How can the government track this?
Point of interjection.
Point of interjection allowed.
Affiliates of this session, has the current speaker ever thought of how central authorities also have bureaucratic bottlenecks and red tape? So please, before you continue, clarify your point.
Point of defense.
Point of defense allowed.
Bona fides affiliation of this debate session. ZRA was formed in 1994, almost the same year almost nearly to our independence. And as we can see, they have worked with blood, sweat, and tears to improve their system with actually more and digital expertise.
Point of rebuttal.
Point of rebuttal denied. May the current speaker continue his point of defense.
Bona fides affiliates of this debate session, I move on. For example, if we actually move on to local councils, we'll find that they're not collecting the few taxes that they're already collecting, such as bus levies and receipt payments. How can you trust them with our tax if they're failing these very small taxing operations? May the school Samaritan please pass it for verification. I now go on to my second point. Double taxation. Decentralizing means that let's go in a scenario that we actually decentralize local councils. It will mean that it will put pressure on local councils to fund their own projects, to pay salaries of people in their jurisdictions, and actually provide services that they never provided before. And for the local councils to account for these expenses, they may or may not provide.
Point of interjection.
Point of interjection allowed.
Members of this house, it's like the precurrent speaker didn't understand the word bureaucratic bottlenecks. This means that the money has to go through different levels, and that in those different levels, there is not much accountability. That's what we're talking about. Please clarify your point before you confuse the auditorium.
Point of defense.
Point of defense allowed.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I think the proposition delegation, they didn't actually do their research well, because if decentralization means that we give full power to the local councils, that means that the money that they collect, only a few will go back to the ZRA, and the rest of the money it will be for theirs to do to oversight. And what do the local councils do with those monies? We don't know, because local councils, as we have seen throughout the years, they have done mismanagement. Most local councils are under corruption schemes, and to go on. Local councils may actually even may introduce extra levies.
Point of defense denied. May the current speaker continue speaking.
Local councils may introduce extra levies and taxations that actually. 30 seconds to sum up, please.
30 seconds allowed.
They may introduce extra levies and taxations, meaning local business owners and citizens will actually be faced with more taxations and charges than ever before. And businesses that actually operate in different districts, like ShopRites and Trade Kings, will actually face multiple taxing systems, and that will create Zambia to become a very hard place for investors to come in and look at. Instead of empowering the people, decentralization risks squeezing from them financially. How can we decentralization? With these few back convincing points, I raise my case. In the Good Samaritan, please pass this for verification.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for those quotations. I will now call upon the third speaker from the proposing side.
Local power sees, frees, and eases greed that aims to seize. Accountable hands make plans that please, appease, and aim to please. But before I go any further, allow me to say that all protocol is highly and deeply observed. I stand here proposing to the motion that states, as I quote, "This House believes that revenue collection should be decentralized to local councils," end of quotation. And we strongly propose this motion due to the following reasons. First and foremost, strengthening democratic participation. Decentralized tax collection allows citizens to engage in budgeting, attend council meetings, and help decide how local taxes are spent. This deepens civic participation and democratic legitimacy. With reference to SDG 16, which is inclusive, representative, and decision-making, which means that if revenue collection is decentralized, people in different constituencies are allowed to take part in decisions on how to make a budget, no matter how, maybe if they are illiterate or not. There's a plan, such you say, okay, you show them this is how we're going to make a budget. May the Good Samaritan please do as wise. Moving on to my next point, which is better tax compliance and morale. When local governments take taxes and spend them visibly on local services, a taxpayer's morale improves. People are more willing to pay because they see the concrete results in their own communities. One of the best examples I can give is when a marketeer or a bus driver pays tax. When they pay that tax, they will attend the local council meetings. And at those meetings, they will be there attending and giving their points of view on how to make the budget or on what the money should be spent on. And when they see that those things that they spoke about at the local council meetings are being done or are in the process of being done, it will encourage them to pay tax and to inspire them to tell more people to pay tax. With reference to SDG 17, which talks about domestic resource and mobilization, may the Good Samaritan please do as wise. Moving on to my next point, which states, reduces large-scale national level corruption. By decentralizing tax collection, revenue does not concentrate in central ministries, which often offer more rent-seeking opportunities. Distributing collection across local governments breaks up power, limiting large corrupt networks, which means that if it's the local councils that are dealing with the money, there are no chances of it going to the central government, because when it goes to the central government, when it's coming back, there are usually long and mostly unnecessary procedures that take place, which usually lead to corrupt activities. May the Good Samaritan
Point of interjection.
please do as wise.
Point of interjection allowed.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, the ZRA has actually thought about the corruption that's going on in their systems. They have, and for them to improve their systems, they have actually worked with the SEC to carry out investigations under corruption. May the Good Samaritan please do as well.
May the current speaker continue speaking, unless there is a point of defense.
Point of defense.
Point of defense allowed.
Opposing delegation. You say that the ZRA has been working with the ACC to fight corruption, but have we seen any cases of corruption being reduced in this case? We still suffer from a lot of cases of corruption. Please, stop trying to mislead our house.
Point of defense allowed.
Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot compare the amount of corruption in the centralized system compared to the corruption in the decentralized system. Decentralized systems are not very clear and they're not very transparent compared to the centralized system. And that is why these policies have been placed in the centralized system to make the revenue collection processes better and transparent.
Point of rebuttal.
Point of rebuttal denied. May the current speaker continue speaking.
With reference to SDG 16, which is reduce corruption and bribery, may the Good Samaritan please do as wise. Moving on to my last point, which is reduce bureaucratic bottlenecks. Local councils acting on their own revenue can spend faster without central delays, which means that if local councils are the ones taking the money, there are lower chances of long and unnecessary procedures because it's just the local council, and from the local council, the money will be spread to their constituency according to what the money is meant to be used on, other than when it goes to the central government, because from the central government, they'll have to share it, they take to different areas, which can lead to corrupt, 30 seconds to sum up.
30 seconds allowed.
Which can lead to corrupt activities, which can actually lead to the reduction of the same revenue that has been collected. May the Good Samaritan please do as wise. With these few but accountable points, I rest my case.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, for that articulation. I will now call upon the third speaker from the opposing side.
Thank you for your call, Madam Chairperson. Riding on the protocols already stated by our opposition leader, allow me to dive into my first point. Unequal distribution. Unequal distribution of funds can lead to worsen regional disparities, as my first speaker had stated that places like Sinda and Nalolo generate low revenue, and places like Chililabombwe and Chingola generate a significant revenue. This imbalance, ladies and gentlemen, this imbalance will lead to uneven development, perpetuating poverty, perpetuating cycles of poverty and inequality, highlighting the need for more equitable resource allocation and effective regulations to ensure all regions benefit from this national growth. Ladies and gentlemen, let me give you an example of the same examples I'm just from stating here. If Nalolo, the way Nalolo has a low revenue collection, isn't it? And we have Chilabombo, which has a high revenue collection. Meaning the collection that's being done there is low in Chilabombo, it's high in Chilabombo, and it's low in Nalolo or Sinda. So the infrastructure that will be built in Sinda and the infrastructure that will be built in Chilabombo will be different. That means that
Point
the
of
country...
interjection.
Point of interjection allowed.
Current speaker, you say that most of the districts you've mentioned earlier are generating low revenue and some are generating high revenue and they're being developed. But have you taken a look at Chongwe? Chongwe is one of the districts with high revenue being generated, but still, is it being developed? Please, stop trying to mislead our house.
Point of defense allowed.
The reason why Chongwe is not developed is because the local council is not doing their job in revenue collection and distribution. So can the proposition delegation please let me finish and validate their points?
Point of rebuttal.
Point of rebuttal denied. May the current speaker continue speaking.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Going to my second point, corruption and mismanagement. Unequal distribution of... Before I got my second point, allow me to provide this research done by the World Bank that shows the poverty rate in Zambia, and the only way to eradicate poverty is through the mining sector. May the Good Samaritan please do as wise. Allow me to now dive into my second point. Corruption and mismanagement. Unequal distribution of funds can lead to corruption, as local officials might have too much control over fund allocation, enabling favoritism and embezzlement of money, especially in areas with weak institutions, as I already stated, Sinda and Nalolo. In weak institutions and lack of transparency, this situation is worsened by the failure of the local councils to collect revenue through the bus levies and the market levies, ladies and gentlemen, which not only deprives local councils of much needed, but also creates an environment ripe for corruption. The lack of effective revenue collection mechanisms can also be exhibited by political interference, having too many politicians involved in the local council, potentially using their influence to protect vested interests and undermine revenue collection and transparency. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a piece of evidence here that will show you, due to time I cannot quote it, but I have a piece of evidence that will show you on every embezzlement that has been done in these local councils. May the Good Samaritan please do as wise. Allow me to dive into my third point, ladies and gentlemen. Legal constraints. Legal
Point
constraints.
of interjection.
Point of interjection denied. The speaker is in the last 30 seconds of speaking.
May I also submit this evidence that talks about the political involvement? May the Good Samaritan please do as wise. Allow me to go into my legal constraints again. Exhibit A, 30 seconds to sum up.
30 seconds allowed.
Exhibit A, Constitution of Zambia Amendment number 2 of 2016 states that there is a discrepancy in functions which are supposed to be performed by the local authorities between the Constitution and the National Decentralization Policy. Exhibit B, due to time I will not state this, but I will give you the exhibits. Exhibit B, Local Government Act number 2 of 2019. Exhibit D, Constitution Development Fund Act number 11 of 2018. With these few points, With these few points, I raise my case.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. We will now move on to the last two speakers of this debate. I will call upon the summarizer from the proposing side.
Let councils steer and clear with cheer and gear to guide the near. But before I go any further, allow me to state that all protocol is highly and deeply observed.
Observed.
Back to my main motion, which states, as I quote, this House believes that revenue collection should be decentralized to local councils, end of quotation. Affiliates of this session, as a summarizer, or rather the government whip of this delegation, allow me to summarize, analyze, otherwise you not understand. But before I go any further, allow me to pass on some rebuttals that were stated by the opposing delegation. First of all, their first speaker talked about mismanagement. Mismanagement came about because of the long processes taken by the local authorities that have been passed down to the local councils. Second of all, they talked about inequality. If that was the case, districts would have been thriving, because we can't have districts that have low development and districts that have high development and they're expected to be the same. They also talked about central authorities having to reduce their misuse and local councils having high mismanagement and unaccountability of funds. Central authorities also misuse money in so many areas, and not forgetting it reduces bureaucratic bottlenecks. May the Good Samaritan please do as wise. Moving on to my first point, which states, promotes equity with districts, with reference to SDG number 10, which states, reduced inequality. Local councils know which villages are underserved and need to be worked on with serious efficiency and adequacy. Example given, Malawian districts increase rural school funding through local discretion and local dissemination. Moving on to my second point, which states, local councils are more accountable to citizens, with reference to SDG number 16. Local leaders face direct community pressure, increasing accountability and efficient service because they know exactly which area needs greater impact. Example given, Rwanda's districts use performance contracts, also known as imihingo. Ghanaian district assemblies show higher citizen satisfaction, and Zambian councils publish their budgets publicly. May the Good Samaritan please do as wise. Heading on to my next point, which states, better alignment with local economic realities. Local councils understand their economic base, which is farming, mining, and trade, better than central authorities. When they control tax instruments, they can tailor tax rates and structures to fit the local economy, supporting growth rather than shifting it. Moving on to my next point, which states, increased transparency and fiscal oversight. Local tax collection makes budgets more visible and manageable for citizens, with local records being more accessible. Civil societies and citizens can easily monitor revenue and spending, reducing corruption. Example given, Zambia, in Chilanga district, councils adopted ICT revenue collection, improving records, keeping accountability and its transparency. May the Good Samaritan please do as wise. Moving on to my next point, better tax compliance and morale. When local government collect tax and spend them visibly on local services, taxpayers' morale improves. People are more willing to pay because they see the concrete results in their communities. Affiliates of this session, here with me, I have evidence that clearly states that in Gambia, here it is, in Gambia, they spent over 66,900 million on 50 people to give them bursaries. Affiliates of this session, if you were able to get a bursary, 100% bursary to go to a college, wouldn't you also want to pay tax because the local councils are the ones that dealt with it? For further adjudication, please, Good Samaritan, do your job. Moving on to my next point, which states, stimulates local economic development with reference to the most important SDG, number 1, no poverty. When local governments collect their own taxes, they reinvest in local businesses, infrastructure, and public goods. This creates a positive cycle. Better services attract investment. More investment increases tax base. More revenue allows further development. May the Good Samaritan please pass this evidence on to the judges for further adjudication. Moving on to my last point, which states, Greater accountability via local tax collection. When local councils collect tax directly, rather than depending solely on central grants, 30 seconds, to Sama.
30 seconds allowed.
They become more accountable to citizens. People see where the money is coming from and how it is used. Decentralizing revenue strengthens our councils, boosts innovation, builds capacity, and empowers citizens to shape their own development. Together we affirm,
My tax, your tax, our destiny.
this isn't just a motto, it is our commitment that local control of tax secures a stronger future for Zambia. With a strong stand of decentralization, I rest my case.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, for gracing us with your rebuttals. I will now call upon the last speaker of this debate, the summarizer from the opposing side.
I am the summarizer from the opposition delegation, and my job is clear: to defend and summarize the points raised by my panelists and to rebut to the points raised by the proposition delegation, standing on the protocol that's already been observed by my speakers. Let me dive into rebutting. The proposition delegation raised points on accountability, transparency, and the reduction of corruption. But if these local councils were transparent, why did they mismanage and lose huge sums of money? Here is a piece of evidence showing the 5.3 million kwacha loss by the Lusaka City Council in 2023. Can the Good Samaritan please pass this on to the judges? And they raised the point that local councils are the closest level of government to the people, meaning that they know the needs of the people and how to manage it. But knowing something is different from knowing how to apply it. So even if they know the needs of the people, they don't have the resources or infrastructure to deliver to the people. Leading to my next point, which is better service delivery. Because of lack of capacity, they lead to more and more mismanagement of funds, leading to underdevelopment of our nation. So why should we give them the task of revenue collection when Zambia Revenue Authority is more established and developed and capable of doing this job? And I would like to emphasize to the proposition that national revenue collection is nothing compared to local revenue collection. Local councils fail to collect levies from bus stations. So how can they collect tariffs from national and international borders? There is no logic in this statement. So can the proposition please validate the perspective? And now let me get to summarizing the points raised by my panel. Point 1, corruption. Local councils face more and more corruption because of cases like nepotism. Local councils elect their leaders on the basis of personal opinions and degree of popularity, leading to the more and more mismanagement of funds because unqualified people have the authority to handle our tax and our revenue. And because of lack of autonomy, local councils lack autonomy, leading to political interference. And most of these councils have what we call a political culture, meaning that they follow strict political expectations. So if a political leader tells them to reduce tax rates so that they can gain votes in an election, they will do this, leading to less and less revenue collected by our government. So can the proposition please change the perspective? And local councils are also more prone to corruption, as I was stating, because of political interference and because they have political culture. So Zambia Revenue Authority should be left the job of national revenue collection, because Zambia Revenue Authority consists of experts specialized in revenue administration, because Zambia Revenue Authority invests in its staff's training and development, making them more strategic when handling the case of revenue collection. Here is more evidence on corruption cases in local councils. Can the Good Samaritan please pass this on to the panel of judges? With this summary, I beg to submit.
Thank you so much, Mr. Summarizer, for that brief yet detailed summary. Sadly, we have come to the end of this brilliant battle of the brains. But stay tuned as the judges tally the results. Who do you think has won? Parklands or Mukamambo? Stay tuned.
Food security is essential for a healthy and prosperous nation. The Zambia Revenue Authority collects taxes from individuals and businesses. These funds are used to support various initiatives aimed at improving food security. Taxes collected by the ZRA are vital for funding agricultural programs and infrastructure around the country. Tax revenues fund agricultural training institutions as well as training programs for farmers, helping them adopt modern farming techniques and improve crop yields. Investments in irrigation systems and storage facilities ensure that crops are grown efficiently and stored safely, reducing post-harvest losses. Taxes also support the distribution of quality seeds and fertilizers, enabling farmers to produce more food and enhance their livelihoods. Community food programs and farmers' markets funded by tax revenues improve access to fresh, nutritious food for all Zambians. Through these initiatives, taxes collected by the ZRA are helping to grow the agricultural sector, building capacity and enhancing productivity in order to create and maintain food security in Zambia. Zambia Revenue Authority. My tax, your tax, our destiny.
The results are in. The judges have decided. Mukamambo II, Girls Secondary School. You have scored. A total of 850 points. A big hand for Mukamambo. Parklands Secondary School. You have gathered. A big hand for Parkland Secondary School. Parkland Secondary School. You gathered. A total Congratulations, Parkland Secondary School. Congratulations, Parkland Secondary School, once again. For taking part in the competition. Parklands, you gathered 789 points, which means that Mukamambo, the second girls secondary school, qualifies to the semi-finals. A big hand for them. See you next week for another debate. Don't miss it for the world.
Mangachi wa mbendise